She found the map buried under mason jars in a root cellar no one had opened in 15 years, hand-drawn on yellowed paper, showing landmarks that didn't exist on any modern map. Rivers that had changed course, trees that had fallen decades ago, springs that only locals remembered. And at the bottom, in her grandmother's handwriting, shaky but deliberate, a single line that made Lily's hands tremble. For Lily, when the time comes, you'll know what to do. 16-year-old Lily Harper doesn't know what to do. She's been living alone in her grandmother's cabin in the Appalachian Mountains for 3 weeks since the funeral. No parents. They died when she was 10 in a car accident on black ice. No other family that claimed her. Just 40 acres of steep forest land, a cabin with a leaking roof and gaps in the walls where wind whistles through at night, and now this map leading to something her grandmother wanted her to find. Something important enough to hide for over a decade. Something that Ada Harper, who lived 83 years and forgot nothing, deemed worthy of waiting for. What Lily discovers by following that map over the next 4 months will change everything. Not just for her, but for an entire valley of people who've forgotten what these mountains used to provide. Who've forgotten that before grocery stores and government assistance and modern convenience, people survived here for generations with nothing but knowledge and community. Because what's buried in the mountains isn't gold or treasure or anything you could sell for money. It's knowledge. Practical, life-saving, community-building knowledge. And knowledge, her grandmother always said while they sat on the porch shelling beans or processing herbs, is the only inheritance that multiplies when you give it away. The only wealth that increases the more you share it. Lily's story starts the way a lot of mountain orphan stories start. Parents gone too soon, a car accident on an icy mountain road when she was 10 years old. Her father driving too fast on a curve he'd driven 1,000 times. Her mother in the passenger seat, and an unexpected patch of black ice that sent them over the guardrail into a ravine 60 feet below. Lily survived because she was at school. Came home to find a sheriff's car in the driveway, and her whole world shattered into before and after. She went to live with her grandmother, Ada Harper, a woman who'd lived 83 years in these same mountains and knew every plant, every spring, every animal trail, every secret these hills kept. Ada was small, barely 5 feet tall, with hands weathered like tree bark and eyes that missed nothing. She'd been born in a cabin 2 ridges over in 1941, had seen the mountains change from thriving communities to forgotten hollows, had watched young people leave for cities and old ways die with the elders who remembered them. Ada taught her granddaughter everything, not gently or slowly, but with the urgency of someone who knows time is limited. How to forage for wild edibles, ramps and watercress in spring, berries in summer, nuts in fall. How to preserve food without electricity, canning and drying and fermenting. How to hunt small game with snares and know which mushrooms would feed you and which would kill you. How to build fires in rain, patch roofs with what you find in the woods, find water underground by redding plants and terrain. How to survive when the rest of the world forgot you existed, which in these mountains it mostly did. They had 6 years together before Ada's heart gave out last October. No warning, no hospital stay, just went to sleep one night in her own bed and didn't wake up. Lily found her in the morning, peaceful, hands folded on her chest like she'd known it was coming and accepted it. The social worker came 3 days after the funeral with paperwork and a concerned expression. Lily was 16, technically old enough to fight foster care placement if she had a plan. An adult willing to vouch for her, some proof she could manage. She lied. Said she had an aunt coming to stay with her, should arrive within the week. The social worker, a tired woman with too many cases and not enough resources, seemed relieved not to have to deal with another placement. She took Lily's information, said she'd check back in a month, and left. That was 3 weeks ago. The aunt doesn't exist. Lily's been surviving alone, burning through the firewood Ada had stacked for winter, eating from the root cellar, trying to figure out what comes next while lying awake at night in a cabin that feels too big and too empty without her grandmother's presence. She finds the map by accident on a cold November afternoon. She's in the root cellar, taking inventory of what food is left, trying to calculate if she can make it through winter. Canned vegetables, pickles, dried beans, preserved fruit. Maybe 3 months' worth if she's careful. Stretches meals, doesn't waste anything. She's moving jars to see what's in the back when her hand brushes something wedged behind the shelf, something that doesn't feel like a jar. She pulls out more jars, creating space, and sees it. A metal box, small, the size of a shoebox, covered in dust. She pulls it out carefully, sets it on the dirt floor, wipes the dust away. It's an old ammunition box, military surplus, the kind Ada used to store things that needed to stay dry. It's locked with a combination lock, 3 numbers, the metal tarnished with age. Lily sits cross-legged on the cold dirt floor and tries combinations. Her birthday, the numbers of her birth month and year, nothing. Ada's birthday, nothing. The year the cabin was built, nothing. She tries a dozen more combinations, growing frustrated, about to give up. Then she remembers. The year Ada was born. 1941. She turns the dial. 1, 9, 4. Click, the lock opens. Inside is the map, folded carefully, and underneath it a leather journal, handwritten. The page is yellowed with age. The journal is dated 1985, 40 years ago. Her grandmother's handwriting, young and strong, not the shaky script Lily remembers from recent years when arthritis had twisted Ada's fingers. She takes both items, the map and the journal, upstairs to the cabin, spreads them on the kitchen table, and starts reading by lamplight because the electricity bill went unpaid 2 weeks ago and the power company shut everything off. The journal explains everything in Ada's methodical handwriting. 40 years ago, when Ada was 43 years old and Lily's mother was just a teenager. There was a real community in this valley. Not a town exactly, no post office or store, but a network of families who lived scattered across the ridges and hollows, who traded skills and goods, who helped each other survive. There were the Tunes, who knew metalwork and could forge tools from scrap. The McAllisters, who raised goats and made cheese. The Hayes family, who kept bees. The Brennans, who had medical training and served as the valley's unofficial doctors. 15 families in all, maybe 60 people, living a life that didn't depend much on the outside world. Ada was the knowledge keeper, the one who collected and documented information that everyone needed. She collected medicinal plant locations, marking GPS coordinates before GPS existed, using landmarks and careful descriptions. Water sources, both springs and places you could dig wells. Wild food patches, blackberries and persimmons and hickory groves. Anything that could help people survive without depending on stores or government or systems that could fail. She documented everything in journals and maps, creating a library of mountain survival knowledge that she kept in the cabin, available to anyone who needed it. But over the years, people left. The young ones first, going to cities for jobs that paid money instead of the barter economy of the mountains. Then older folks, moving to towns where hospitals were close and life was easier. Land got sold to outsiders who built vacation homes they used twice a year. The community dissolved slowly, like sugar in water, until Ada was one of the few old-timers left who remembered how it used to be. But Ada kept the knowledge anyway, hoping someone would need it again someday. She'd made this map as a master key, showing locations of her hidden caches throughout the mountains. Seed banks buried in waterproof containers at strategic locations. Medicinal plant gardens in protected hollows where they could grow undisturbed. Tools stashed in caves and abandoned buildings. Spring houses with cold storage still functional. A network of resources scattered across 40 miles of mountain range, waiting for someone who knew how to find them. Waiting for Lily. The note at the bottom, "For Lily, when the time comes you'll know what to do," suddenly makes perfect sense. Ada knew she wouldn't live forever. She'd prepared this inheritance years ago, maybe before Lily was even born. Not money or property that could be taken by creditors or taxes, but something more valuable. The knowledge and resources to survive, to thrive, to rebuild what was lost. Ada had bet everything on Lily being smart enough and stubborn enough to use it. Lily stares at the map until the lamp oil runs low and the wick starts to sputter. She should sleep. It's past midnight, but her mind is racing. Because this map isn't just about her survival anymore. It's bigger than that. It's about proving that the old ways still work. That you don't need money or government assistance or modern convenience to live a good life in these mountains. You just need knowledge and the willingness to use it. And maybe, just maybe, the courage to share it. She starts the next morning at first light, the map and journal in her backpack. The map shows 12 marked locations, each one labeled in Ada's neat handwriting. Some close, within a few miles of the cabin. Others distant, requiring full-day hikes into remote areas Lily's never explored. She decides to start close, build confidence, learn the system before tackling the harder caches. The first mark is labeled Seed Bank, Stone Spring, East Ridge. She knows the spring, a cold water source that runs year-round about a mile through the woods to the east. She packs a backpack with water, some dried venison, a flashlight, her grandmother's old hunting knife with the worn wooden handle, and sets out at dawn while frost still glitters on the grass. The hike takes 40 minutes through steep forest, following a deer trail that winds between oak and hickory trees. The forest is quiet except for her footsteps and the occasional call of a crow. When she reaches the spring, water bubbling cold and clear from between rocks, she starts searching the surrounding stone outcropping. The map shows a specific landmark, a boulder shaped like a sitting bear. It takes her another 30 minutes of searching, circling the spring before she finds it. The boulder, covered in moss, does look like a bear if you view it from the right angle. Behind the boulder, hidden behind a curtain of ferns, is a gap between two rocks. She moves the stones carefully and pulls out a sealed plastic container. Military surplus ammunition storage, the same kind as the box that held the map. Inside are glass jars filled with seeds. Dozens of varieties, each jar labeled in Ada's handwriting with the variety name and the year collected. Beans, 5 different types. Corn, 3 varieties including one labeled Cherokee White Corn Heirloom. Squash, tomatoes, peppers, herbs. Some of these seeds are 30 years old, saved and stored and waiting. Lily sits beside the spring, holding jars of seeds her grandmother saved before Lily was even born, and cries. Not sad crying, though there's grief in it. Grateful crying, overwhelmed crying, because Ada planned this decades ago. Knew that someday, someone might need to start over. Might need food security. Might need the independence that comes from growing your own sustenance. And she'd prepared for it with the same methodical care she brought to everything. The second cache is marked Medicinal Garden North, Hollow Hidden. Lily hikes there the next day, a longer trek, almost 3 hours through rougher terrain. The hollow is a sheltered valley, where cold air settles and frost comes early, but it's also protected from wind and deer browse. She finds it after 2 hours of searching, guided by Ada's descriptions in the journal. Not a garden exactly, but a patch where Ada had planted and tended medicinal herbs for decades. Gold and zeal, valuable and rare. Black cohosh, for pain in women's health. Ginseng, worth more per pound than gold to the right buyers. Bloodroot, lobelia, skullcap. Plants that take years to establish, that can't be cultivated, that are worth more than gold to people who know how to use them. The patch is overgrown but alive, the plants thriving in the protected microclimate Ada had chosen. Lily marks the location carefully, in her own notebook, drawing her own map, making her own notes. This is a resource she can harvest carefully, sustainably, taking only what she needs and leaving enough to regenerate, and possibly trade, because these herbs are valuable to herbalists and healers. The third cache changes everything. It's marked Tools Old McAllister Cabin Cellar. The McAllister place is abandoned, has been for 20 years, since the last of that family moved to Florida. Lily hikes there on day 4 of her search, finds the collapsed cabin, just a stone chimney standing and rotted logs, and locates the root cellar underneath, half caved in, but accessible if you're small and brave enough to squeeze through the gap. Inside, wrapped carefully in oilcloth and layers of plastic, she finds tools. Not modern tools from hardware stores, but old ones. Hand-forged axes with hickory handles, the metal still sharp under a layer of rust. Cross-cut saws with teeth like wolves. Draw knives for shaping wood. Augers for drilling holes. Planes for smoothing boards. Tools for building without electricity, for working wood and stone and metal with nothing but human power and skill. Tools that are practically indestructible if maintained properly, that can last generations, that represent skills most people have forgotten. She takes 2 axes and a saw, leaves the rest cached for later. She'll need them eventually, but for now she can only carry so much. She cleans them at the spring on the way back, wire brushing away rust, oiling the metal, tightening the handles. By the time she reaches the cabin, the tools are functional, ready to use, and she feels wealthier than she has since Ada died. By the end of 2 weeks, she has found 7 of the 12 caches. Seeds in multiple locations for redundancy. Tools at 3 different sites. Medicinal plants in 2 hidden gardens. A spring house at an abandoned homestead. The cold water still running through stone troughs, perfect for food storage without refrigeration. A cave with shelves where Ada had stashed preserved food years ago, most of it still good, and a space that could store much more. A patch of wild fruit trees, apples and pears and cherries, that Ada had planted decades ago, and that now fruit abundantly every year with no human care. And a location marked clay deposit, where clay suitable for pottery can be dug from a riverbank. She's also found something else, a pattern that becomes clear as she visits each cache. These locations aren't random. They're strategic, positioned to allow someone to live completely, self-sufficiently across all 4 seasons. Seeds for growing food in summer. Tools for building shelter and processing resources. Medicine for healing. Water sources and food preservation. Wild food for foraging. Even clay for making containers. Everything you need for a life independent of the modern economy, all mapped and cached and waiting. Lily starts using the resources immediately. She plants seeds from the cache in the garden plot behind the cabin, even though it's late November and most won't germinate until spring. But some, the cold hardy greens and root vegetables, she plants under row cover, gambling that they'll establish before deep winter. She harvests medicinal herbs carefully from the hidden gardens, dries them on racks in the cabin, starts learning how to prepare them into tinctures and salves and teas from detailed notes in Ada's journal. She uses the tools to repair the cabin roof, splitting cedar shingles by hand the way her grandmother taught her, using the draw knife to shape them, the auger to drill holes for wooden pegs. It's slow work, much slower than using power tools, but it's work she can do with her own hands and materials from the forest. Work that makes her feel competent and capable in ways school never did. But she's not just surviving. She's thinking bigger, her mind racing with possibilities. Because if Ada could create this network of resources 40 years ago, Lily can use it now, not just for herself, but for others. The valley has people struggling, she knows this. Families barely making it on part-time jobs and disability checks. Old-timers on fixed incomes, choosing between medicine and food. Young people with no opportunities, no future except leaving. What if she shared this knowledge? What if she taught people how to use what the mountains provide? What if she could help rebuild even a piece of what Ada described in her journals? She starts small, cautiously, testing the waters. There's an older woman, Mrs. Hayes, who lives 2 miles down the valley in a trailer that's falling apart. Lily knows her from before, from times she and Ada would visit. Mrs. Hayes has arthritis bad, her hands twisted into claws, constant pain that the VA hospital provides minimal relief for. Lily hikes there one morning with a jar of dried herbs and careful instructions written out. Black cohosh and willow bark, processed into a tincture following Ada's recipe. She explains how to use it, how much, how often. Mrs. Hayes is skeptical, but desperate enough to try anything. Within a week the pain eases. Not gone, arthritis doesn't heal, but manageable. Mrs. Hayes can use her hands again, can open jars and hold things and live with less suffering. Word spreads the way word spreads in small communities, person to person, neighbor to neighbor. An older man with chronic back pain asks if Lily has anything that might help. A young mother whose kid gets constant ear infections wants to learn about immune-supporting herbs. A middle-aged guy who can't afford his blood pressure medication wonders if there's a natural alternative. Lily teaches what she knows, shares what Ada taught her, and trades herbs for things she needs. Food, help with cabin repairs, firewood, labor. By November, she's teaching a small group of 6 people who meet at her cabin once a week. She shows them wild edible plants before the first hard freeze kills everything back, teaching them to identify chickweed and henbit and purple, dead nettle that grow through winter, how to identify trees for firewood by bark and branch pattern, which ones burn hot, which ones smoke, which ones to avoid, how to preserve food without electricity, using the cold storage in the spring house. The drying and fermenting methods Ada perfected over decades. How to build simple tools from materials you can find in the woods. People bring what they can as trade. Vegetables from their gardens, homemade bread, firewood already cut and split. She doesn't charge money because she doesn't need money. She needs community, connection, purpose, the things that make survival worth it. The real test comes in early December, when a hard freeze hits the valley, temperatures dropping to near zero and staying there for a week. Power goes out across the valley, ice bringing down lines faster than the utility company can repair them. Some people panic, huddling in their homes with no heat, no light, food spoiling in dead refrigerators. But Lily's students don't panic. They have food preserved in ways that don't require electricity. They have firewood stacked and knowledge of how to build fires that heat efficiently. They know how to stay warm and fed without modern convenience because Lily taught them and they practiced. They help their neighbors, sharing food and warmth and knowledge. And suddenly people notice. How did you manage so well during the freeze? Where'd you learn this? Who taught you? Can you teach us? That's when Lily makes a decision that will change everything. She's going to open the network, all 12 cache locations. She's going to map them publicly, create a community resource that anyone can access. Anyone who wants to learn can have seeds, tools, knowledge. But there's a rule, the same rule Ada lived by. You have to give back. Contribute seeds from your harvest. Maintain the caches, replacing what you take. Teach what you learn to the next person. Knowledge multiplies when shared. That's what Ada always said. That's the only economics that makes sense in the mountains. She creates a simple system, no paperwork or bureaucracy, just common sense and community trust. People who want to participate come to a meeting at her cabin. She teaches them the locations, shows them the map, explains the rules, shares the philosophy. Take what you need, give back what you can, teach the next person. By January, there are 15 people in the network actively participating. By February, 30. They're sharing seeds, teaching skills, helping each other build and repair and preserve. They are rebuilding what Ada started 40 years ago, a community of knowledge and mutual support. The social worker shows up in March on a cold morning, with sleet falling. Someone reported that Lily's living alone, a concerned neighbor who meant well but didn't understand the situation. The social worker expects to find a struggling teenager, barely surviving, maybe malnourished, certainly overwhelmed. Instead, she finds a thriving homestead, a garden being prepared for spring, beds already built and soil turned, a cabin in good repair, roof solid, walls chinked against wind, a root cellar stocked with preserved food, a workshop with tools organized and maintained, and a group of 6 neighbors who happened to be there that morning, learning seed starting techniques, who immediately vouch for Lily. They say she's helped them, taught them skills that improved their lives, that she's more capable than most adults they know, that she's created something valuable for the whole community. The social worker is confused but impressed. She asks if there's an adult willing to serve as legal guardian until Lily turns 18 in 7 months. 3 people volunteer immediately, without hesitation. Mr. Chun, an older man who's been learning tool making and blacksmithing from Ada's notes, who says Lily's taught him more in 3 months than he learned in years. Mrs. Hayes, who credits Lily's herbal knowledge with giving her quality of life back, who says she'd be honored to help. And old Doc Brenheim, who used to practice medicine in the valley before retiring, who is fascinated by Lily's plant knowledge and wants to learn more about traditional mountain medicine. Doc Brennan becomes the official guardian, signs the paperwork, satisfies the legal requirements. But really, he's a student. Lily teaches him plant medicine, the uses of dozens of herbs, preparations and dosages and contraindications. He teaches her first aid and basic anatomy, filling gaps in her knowledge, helping her understand why remedies work. They create a partnership that benefits both. By summer, they're running a small, informal clinic out of Lily's cabin. Nothing official, no licenses or certifications, but providing care for people who can't afford doctors or don't trust modern medicine, or simply prefer traditional approaches. Herbal remedies, basic first aid, health guidance, referrals to doctors when needed. It's not legal exactly, operating in a grey area, but in the mountains, what the government doesn't know doesn't matter much. The garden produces abundantly that summer. Lily's learning curve was steep, but Ada's seeds are vigorous, selected over generations of productivity and resilience. She harvests beans and squash and tomatoes and corn, more than she can eat. She saves seeds carefully, the best specimens from the most productive plants, adds them to the cache at the stone spring. She teaches seed saving to anyone who asks, showing them how to select, clean, dry, store. Knowledge that used to be common, that her generation never learned, that's critical for food security. By fall, the network has grown to 50 active participants. They're trading goods and skills at a level that resembles the old community Ada described. Someone makes soap from lard and lye and sells it for trade. Someone else weaves baskets from willow and honeysuckle. A guy who used to work construction before an injury teaches building techniques adapted for hand tools. A woman who raised chickens her whole life teaches poultry management. The knowledge economy expands, becomes self-sustaining, creates value that has nothing to do with money. Lily turned 17 in October, exactly 1 year after Ada died. The community throws a gathering at the cabin, an informal celebration. 60 people show up. They bring food, potluck style, more food than anyone could eat. Music, guitars and fiddles, and voices singing old mountain songs. Stories about Ada. Memories people share, keeping her alive through words. An older man who knew Ada for 50 years stands up and says something that makes Lily cry. Your grandmother would be proud. She spent 40 years preparing for this, for you. You're doing what she hoped. You're bringing the knowledge back to life. You're rebuilding what we lost. And you're doing it better than we did, because you're sharing it with everyone instead of keeping it to ourselves. That night, sitting alone on her porch after everyone's gone home, Lily pulls out the map and Ada's journal. She's visited all 12 caches now, used them, maintained them, added to them. The network is alive and growing and will continue whether she's involved or not. But she realizes something important. This is just the beginning. There are more mountains, more valleys, more people scattered across Appalachia and beyond who've forgotten how to live with the land instead of against it. She can't teach everyone. One person can only do so much. But she can't teach teachers, people who'll spread the knowledge further, who'll start their own networks, who'll keep the tradition alive. She starts writing her own journal, documenting everything Ada taught her and everything she's learned since, creating a manual that someone else could use to replicate what she's built. She's thinking generationally now, the way Ada did, building something that outlasts her, creating a legacy not of property or money, but of knowledge and community. By the time winter arrives again, 14 months after Ada died, the network is self-sustaining. People are growing food, making tools, teaching skills, helping each other through challenges. They've rebuilt a piece of what existed 40 years ago, adapted for modern times, but based on old wisdom. And Lily understands, finally, what the map really was. Not just locations of caches, though it was that too. It was a map to self-sufficiency, to community, to a way of life that doesn't depend on systems that can fail. It was her grandmother's way of saying, you can survive anything if you know how to use what's around you. And you can thrive if you share that knowledge with others instead of hoarding it. On a cold January morning, she hikes to the original seed cache at the stone spring where this all started. She adds jars of seeds she saved from her garden, carefully labeled with variety and date. She updates the inventory list Ada started, and she adds a note in her own handwriting now, clear and strong. For whoever finds this next, use what you need, give back what you can, teach someone else. The knowledge is the inheritance. Pass it on, don't let it die with you. She walks back to the cabin as snow begins to fall, big soft flakes that catch in her hair. Smoke rises from the chimney, grey against white sky. Her garden beds are mulched and sleeping under straw. The root cellar is stocked with enough food for winter and some to share. And she knows with absolute certainty that if she died tomorrow, the network would continue. Because she's done what Ada did. She's planted seeds of knowledge in the community. And those seeds, like all good seeds properly tended, will grow and spread and feed people long after she's gone. If this story of hidden knowledge and community resilience sparked something in you, hit that subscribe button now. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss these stories about mountain wisdom and the power of sharing what you know. Leave a comment and tell me, what knowledge did your grandparents have that's been lost? What skills do you wish you'd learned before it was too late? And share this video with someone who needs to know that the old ways aren't dead. They are just waiting for someone brave enough to remember them and generous enough to pass them on. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.